All right, here we are. We're back with another edition of Les, Kevin, More Tech from UTEC IT. Right, Les?
UTECIT.com.
Right, there's where you'll find us.
That's where you'll find us.
So today we've got a special guest, a guy, the big-time executive here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Please.
Yes, we're trying to get him in here. You know, it's taken us this long to get him in here. And we were fortunate because he's just on the layover from DTW.
Right.
Flying in from New York, getting a clean pair of underwear to go to Sweden now.
Wow.
So we were able to get him in here. A golden limo brought him up. Executive transportation said, "Hey, just get him right here real quick, and then we'll let him go to the airport." So welcome, Jason Forcier.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad to see that kept the bourbon rolling. You know, it's from one party to the next. So,
Jason, I'm terribly excited about this. You know, because Kevin's, he's talked about you quite a bit, and it's just great to meet you. And you know, your biography stands on its own, and tremendous successful business career and family.
thank you. Yeah.
So
I don't know how successful it's been, but we're working at it every day. You know, it's a work in progress.
well, the company, I mean, UTEC had to open the bankroll, had to have our people reach out to your people and schedule this.
It's the way it works. Guaranteed money finally got to the right level. So
Yes,
here we are,
exactly.
right?
You think those college quarterbacks are tough with NIL? You got to see this guy negotiate a deal. But seriously, Jason's been. We met him through soccer, through our kids playing soccer together, and I've been an admirer from afar with what you've done with your track record at Bosch, Lear, GM. I mean, A123 is really where we kind of came together, but we got I say it and I mean it, a big-time CEO in here that's a great leader and a great executive and a family man. So
I'm curious about that, Jason, because in your opinion on the leadership, because I've always read and thought and believe, it all starts leadership. That's the driving force. But so then I always wonder, well, is somebody a born leader? Are they a trained leader? Did they develop leadership skills, or is it just some people are just magnetic personality? Where do you sit on that?
Nurture versus nature, I guess, is the question. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of all the above, right? Mm-hmm. It's like everything. There's only so many Bo Jacksons. I watched 30 for 30 last night.
Wasn't that good?
So, yeah, that's great. Guys that are just born naturally like that, they come along once in a generation. I think from a CEO standpoint, it's the same thing, right? If you top executives, for the most part, they have to work at it, right? We're all work in progress. We're, going back to your childhood and all that. And then, the most important thing though is you got to marry up, and I know Kevin did that, and I certainly did that. That's the most important part of being a good leader, is having the right lady with you.
Yeah, that's and I mean, for you guys it was probably simple, but for me it was a hard close. I mean, it took me a while. But
you went with the first lady that said yes.
No, she didn't realize. It took me some years. But that's a great comment, though, about the family, and having the partnership and what have you. When did you kind of get an inkling that leadership was in your future?
Well, I think right away I didn't really want to go to engineering school, and my dad just said, "That's what you're doing," and he was right. God bless him. He's 81 and still playing golf every day. But he just, I thought maybe I wanted to go be a doctor. Yeah, and that would have been a terrible decision. I'd be a terrible doctor. My bedside manner, as Kevin can tell you, is not the best. So, he said, "Hey, I think you need to go to engineering school, and then, you can do what you want after that." And it gave me a basis for really, getting into any. You can be a lawyer, you can go to, law school, you can go to grad school, you can go to med school after engineering. And so I never really wanted to be an engineer, but that basis gave me the ability to pick up on technology very quickly. And, throughout my career, I've really been involved in technology businesses. And I think one of the skill sets that I've developed is just being able to pick up technology pretty quickly. But then I went and got an MBA and became a business guy right away. So, I I didn't want to design stuff. I'm not a great engineer, but the business side was really what attracted me. And I started business school at night, almost right after undergrad.
Wow.
Yeah. So it took me about 6 years to get through Michigan, but I'm a Prod Ross School graduate. So
There you go.
Yeah.
A Wolverine.
Yeah, Wolverine. Yeah. Go blue.
And, you know.
Yeah. Look, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
But this year we can talk about it if you want. I mean,
Yeah, we're just going to go right by that.
Yeah.
The leaders and best. There he is.
Yeah. I actually bought Coach Day dinner down in Columbus. I
remember you
working in
saying
Columbus
that.
for 5 years, and it was the year that they blew us out. And I paid his check, and I said to the waiter, "Just tell him that that's how proper U of M graduates behave." And we won't go any farther than that.
Did he? And he accepted the.
He did, and he sent a thank you. He did not come over to the table, which typical Ohio State guy. But whatever. We U of M people take the high road.
He's probably afraid to spit in his food. But
Why is that what he would have done?
No. So I've always been amazed that you're traveling all the time, right? I mean, in China with A123 and all around the globe. I mean, the new role here as SVP, you're traveling already, right, to Sweden, and you said a trip to Vietnam. But as a leader, you got to be in those places, right? You got to go meet in front of the different organizations. But how do you balance that with at home too? Because I'm always amazed that you never missed a game, you know what I mean? And you're always there for everything that the kids do.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. So, and I meant what I said. You got to marry the right person, right? Mm-hmm. So my partner is Michelle, and she manages all that stuff and keeps me on track and keeps me grounded, like literally making sure I'm at the games, like knowing what's going on. I don't make every single one. I just missed my first hockey game this season Wednesday, but with the advent of technology, you can watch those hockey games live on Live Barn. So I did watch it, and that was great. But listen, there's nothing more important than your family. And, when Michelle always says, when you die and, people are going to not look at your headstone and say, well, he's a great CEO, or, maybe there's a few of those guys but it's more about your legacy and your family and all that. So, I think it's just super important. And COVID certainly helped with being around, right? My kids are both golfers, as you know, and COVID didn't really shut down golfing. So we were very fortunate there. And so I was able to make pretty much every golf tournament and outing, and love watching the kids play. So I do think it's super important. And I'm also, it's not lost on me that, at a certain level, you can start managing your schedule a little more. So like when I go to Sweden or Vietnam, I look at the kids' sports schedule and plan around it. So it's not everybody can do that. But for me, it's always been super important. In the last 15 years since the kids were born, I've been in a position to do that. So
it's awesome.
And so I do. I plan travel around sporting events or whatever, and try to be there all the time. So super important. But I love it too. I'd rather be at a golf match or a hockey event than sitting in a boardroom.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, you're a natural leader there too, because at any of these events, he's always the first one to organize the parent group and the booster group for whatever he's doing, or they're the tournament coordinator, or on any board for the youth sports.
That's something you're born with, I think. Back to your question, and that's where my wife, she told me today when I got down here, do not take on any more work. I'm already out of my hobby is a board role that I have with a public company, and as you know, I've been pretty heavily involved with the golf team and all that, and I do love it. I'd rather do that full time. So in between my gigs, I try to get very involved with the kids' sport teams. But they're at an age now where they're telling me, especially my son, he's like, Dad, you need to be a parent in the stands only. So,
well, that might be a decent segue into, you just said you're on a new board with, what is it, Freyr?
Yeah, Freyr. Yeah, the Norwegian company, publicly traded on the NYSE. So that's an interesting story. Lithium battery producer, kind of technology agnostic, but they're expanding rapidly, and they went through a SPAC acquisition, became public, and I just joined the board in December. So excited to get rolling with those guys. And I was CEO of A123 and lived the first incarnation of electrification back in 2009. And this is an exciting time. I think it's here to stay. And Freyr certainly got a lot of support in Europe, and they're building a huge factory in Georgia, and so I'm excited about it. So it's a different role. one of the big questions they ask executives is like, can you really be a board member? Like, you're not running the company. We have a great CEO and all that, so it's not my job to run the company. And that's a different model. Like, even if I'm thinking about the company, I have a hard time like saying like, it's not my job to be thinking this much about it, right?
I was going to say it'd be hard for you knowing your background.
Yeah, you got to back out a little bit. And so I'm doing my best there to
So where do you see yourself, Jason, in that role?
Well, I was brought in as like a industry expert, and the company's got a great board of legal minds and financial minds, and right now any startup company, which they were, especially in this space, is all about capital, and so there's some great guys on the board that have helped them raise a ton of capital. They've raised almost $1 billion, and that's job one, right?
And you provide that business marketing piece of the equation. In other words, how are we going to make money with this? Here's my thoughts and suggestions.
Well, and also just deploying the capital. We did it at A123. We spent $1 billion in deploying, production capital, building plants. We built them here in Michigan. They're building one in Georgia, but just that knowledge of what it takes to build a factory and produce a quality product. Yeah. So that's what I'm there for. And then we just added a scientist from Columbia, to the board, and he's going to bring the technology side in, and so it's a great, well-rounded board, very global, very interesting to be on a board call. I'll tell you that.
What is the predominant language?
Everybody speaks English,
English,
yeah. So especially the Scandinavians, it's very good English. So
don't you find it interesting? A little bit of a sidebar though, that in some parts of the world, if somebody speaks 2, 3, 4 languages, it's kind of expected. That it amazes me. It does that. But over here, it's an elective in high school. But yet, you'll have somebody bussing a table that can speak German and Russian, English,
right?
And it's just like how they're raised.
Thankfully, the language of business is English.
So
I speak that one okay. I'm struggling to learn it all.
Well, we're illiterate in 4 different languages,
exactly. right? Yeah, we're struggling right now.
We're struggling with English, but I took a lot of French in high school. But my thing is I try to learn 2 words or 3 words in every country that I'm going to, like how to order a beer.
Right.
That's really important. How to say thank you. That's important. So.
He's got that Babbel app on his phone.
Nice. Nobody plays a joke on you and says, "Hey, say this," and it's really
no, I try not to do that.
So, building, and you're good at that. You built the new headquarters over there. I guess they're not new anymore in Novi for A123 Systems. You're overseeing these plants. Reminded me, we were talking at Christmas time with one of your colleagues that had just come back from Mexico down there. And he said, now you were just leaving Vertiv at the time. You hadn't been down there in a while. But they said, Kevin, we went down there, and they're still talking about this guy here. He goes, you got to see, they got 20,000 people down there outside Mexico. I can't pronounce the name of the city, but it's outside of Mexico City. Monterrey. But they said these guys would run through a wall for this guy down there. He's a hero down there. And it was really neat to see this colleague just gushing about
it's leadership, right?
Yeah. Well, that story is a great story. I mean, we committed to that area after a pretty extensive search looking for a new location, and I think what they respected is I was down there, boots on the ground, and when we talked about it, I'm a big go to the Gemba guy, go to the source. That's a term from lean manufacturing, but it applies to everything. And at the grand opening, they had a picture of me standing in a dirt field with a pair of virtual reality glasses on, and the guys down there that own the property were trying to in the glasses I could see what the building looked like. So I was standing there looking around, and I could turn and see their version of what our factory should look like. And so they had at the grand opening, they showed that picture, and the people were like, I didn't mail it in, like I was there, and I think that's super important. Like, we talked about return to office before we got going here, and just that face-to-face, press in the flesh, whatever you want to call it, super important. And so in Monterey, we committed to a whole ecosystem there from education. So we partnered with universities. We put a tech center there, opened a tech center, opened a shared service center so we could outsource, tasks that weren't super complicated. I won't mention any specific because I don't want to offend anybody, but you can, some of the stuff in your business that you're like, do I really need to pay all this money to do this? Yeah. We had a center down there. We could just outsource it. But then the engineering and then the plant. We opened a massive Industry 4.0 plant, and I had a great guy down there that did it. And, he was there every day. But even during COVID, I flew down every month and was boots on the ground. And, I think that's what it takes. Got COVID down there, actually. So that's how I caught my COVID, was being down there. And but I had my vaccination,
but
so I'm all good.
It speaks to leading from the field.
Yeah.
Front lines leadership.
Yeah, well, this colleague happens to be, I'd say, on the lower end of the management team, but he said the rank and file down there, from a regular guy on the line to the executives, were, how's Jason doing? When they were out, he was coming down from there, tell him we said hi, and it's kind of a neat story. I think it's a compliment to you and your leadership.
Freyr, you're gonna have to tell me who you were talking to. I'm surprised a little bit about this, but that's all right. Yeah, no, I'm super proud of that. And Vertiv just cut the ribbon on their new headquarters building in Columbus, which I had a part of. So it's good to see that. So one of my philosophies, and I'm a fix it guy. Like I like working with private equity, and so I don't stay long in terms of a career. I'm at companies 3 to 5 years. But leave it better than you found it is one of the models that I think it's important. So, we're not there to just cut and leave, right? You want to, cutting's part of the process. You have to you kind of have to cut off the arm to save the body type of thing. But once you do that, you also have to invest in the right areas. And so a lot of our companies, will cut certain areas, but then we'll reinvest. Like at SVP, we're going to, go through some cuts, but at the same time, we're reinvesting in IT infrastructure and our e-commerce strategy and a lot of things you guys do.
Yeah.
How does a guy that helped build cars and sell cars, and then he was doing batteries, how does he pick sewing machines for his next venture? Tell us about what intrigued you about that.
First of all, you've never seen a more high-tech machine than a sewing machine. You go to Walmart and buy one for $150. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Those are low-cost machines that people put in their closet and use once or twice a year. But the real enthusiasts in this business have a machine that costs $12,000, $15,000, and it's got camera systems built into it. It's got a 7-inch LCD screen. It's Wi-Fi enabled. There's an app, MySonet app, and huge amount of technology. I was blown away by the technology in one of these machines. And they basically sew on their own. You just tell it what to do, literally with voice commands, and it does the work.
Alexa, make me a
And these aren't people making money on this. These are hobbyists. Our main customer is a hobbyist. So there's a huge technology element to it. But at the same time, business is business, and it's a complicated go-to-market global structure, manufacturing all over the world. We have a plant in Brazil, plants in Vietnam. A business not unlike many businesses that thought the COVID boom was going to last forever. And you look at companies like Peloton, well documented, where they overexpanded and thought that craze was going to continue forever. Peloton's a great product, but people are now outside again. They're back to work. They're doing other things. And same thing in the crafts business. Crafts are great. People love it. They still do it, but they're not sitting at home all day, every day anymore. And so they've got other things that they're doing.
Right.
And
that's interesting.
The business dropped pretty massively last year, and then the recession in Europe with the war and the energy crisis and the strength of the dollar. These are all global business things that everybody's dealing with now. But it's there's no new normal. It's pre-COVID again, right? The same stuff matters. You've got to have the right cost structure, good customer, great product, and I think SVP has all that. It's just a matter of they've got a little complacent during COVID that those times were going to last forever. They were working from home for 3 years, and I think that's they became very remote. I think as you're seeing across industries, that's we're going back to the office, right? And so the hybrid model, I think, is the right approach, and so we're driving that, and it's not for everybody, So we're going to lose some employees and create some turnover, but that's okay. Yeah, got to be together.
So where do you? What are your initial thoughts about in the? Because what I just heard you say is that things kind of boomed, right? And then now you have these outer issues that you can't control, right?
Yeah,
war and what have you, and inflation. But so now you're kind of in a lull. What are your initial thoughts? I imagine you're going to be focused to realigning your cost structure and whatever. But how do you get the community, the hobbyists?
Yeah.
How do you fan that flame?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same across a lot of businesses. You have to have a good product that people want, and you have to be in a good industry. And I think we have both of those. We have a great pipeline. We have a real loyal customer base. Singer's the number one brand in the world, right, for hobbyists and crafts. You look at any study, and it's well known. And we have licensees in Asia that sell Singer motorcycles. It's crazy. In Thailand, Singer's everywhere. So it's a massively strong brand. And then of course we have the Husqvarna and Viking brands that we license from the parent over there. And so those are really great brands. And so we have these great brands, a really strong pipeline. So it is all about adjusting to the cost structure and the supply base. I mean, our volumes are down, so you got to deal with that. The other thing every company's dealing with was the supply chain shortages, freight costs.
Right.
A container pre-COVID costs less than $2,000 to ship from China to LA. And when it got to LA, it sat off the port for a month. Everybody saw pictures of the boats just sitting there. That stuff's all gone. The boats don't sit there anymore. Freight costs have dropped from $25,000 to less than $5,000. So we're almost back to pre-COVID era freight costs. So a lot of tailwinds on freight and cost now coming back with us. And then just dealing with, depending on what your cost structure looks like, the strength of the dollar can be a benefit or not. And so that's where competition comes in, and looking at where they're buying and selling. And, we call that FX in business. What's this foreign exchange issues? And we're not in a great place. This strong dollar doesn't really help us.
It's amazing at a global organization how that alone can affect the financial results.
Yeah, millions of dollars. I mean, we're a $500-600 million company, and we had $15 million of FX impact last year.
Yes.
Imagine that. I mean, it's just the freight cost impact was over $20 million, right? So things that kind of out of control. But the flip side of that is, people don't like to hear this, but you have to drive price increases, and that's why inflation has spiked. I mean, now we'll get into a huge macroeconomics discussion, but all the stimulus didn't help. And I think any executive you talk to will say, and I don't mean to be political, but all the stimulus money that went out was terrible for the economy. Look what it's done. Now we have hyperinflation, and we're having to raise rates and control it all. And so maybe it was helpful at the time, but it's created an environment that's terrible for business. And so prices are going up because freight costs are up, supply chain issues, and so businesses like ours dealing with massive cost increases, and so that's the ugly cycle. Then employees want to make more money, and so you really have to get inflation under control. Otherwise, your economy will spin out of control.
We're gonna have some painful time ahead.
Yeah, and I think we're doing the right thing. We got to raise rates. We've got to get inflation under control. Looks like it's starting to happen, and that's good. And then we'll hopefully we'll get out of a mild recession in the first half of next year and start to see normal growth again.
Have you any thoughts on so you've got a great brand, great product. The other thing that I'm assuming is you have great distribution.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
I wish we had great distribution.
Okay.
And you got to have a good team. I think that's the other thing is important. You got to have a good team. And I think at the core, the team is very, very good. They know the business. Even my executives, most of them men, women, doesn't matter. Most of them know the business really, really well. And distribution becomes extremely important.
Yeah.
And so then with freight impacts, inflationary costs, you start to say, well, why am I manufacturing in Asia? Why aren't I in Mexico? Which is exactly back to what we did at Vertiv, right? We came to the conclusion importing from Asia wasn't going to be good. Fortunately, we were a little ahead of the curve, so we got it done before all this really got to be too bad. But it's something we call in region for region. So if you're going to sell in the U.S., make it in the Americas. Now, I'm not saying it has to be made in America. I wish we could do that, but from a cost structure standpoint, Mexico is a lot cheaper. So we're looking at that. We don't have a Mexico footprint, but half of our revenue is made in America. So we're importing out of Asia, selling in the U.S., and when freight costs spike and inflation hits and supply chain shortages, your lead times extend. So not only do you have a cost issue, now something called working capital. You guys know this in your world, right? I mean, it's you order material and typically your supplier will give you 60-day terms. So after 60 days of them producing it, I have to pay them. Well, if it's sitting on a boat for 110 days,
you're inverse.
Yeah, so
Upside down.
you're I'm paying suppliers, but I'm not seeing revenue, for a couple of months, 3-4 months, and then my customers have terms, right? So, so the game is to shorten those lead times and try to figure out the balance
Get your
between
turns.
cost.
I know a couple guys down in Monterey. They'll be excited to see you come back down there in Mexico and have some more tequila for you.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
But we started out with the discussion talking about leadership, right? So these problems, again, we're not at the global level, but these issues are.
We're taking you global today.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we're going global.
Less Kevin, more tech.
Monroe County and Genesee aren't global.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But all businesses face these types of problems right now, and they will in the future, and it's a matter of scale.
Yeah.
And I'm just in time, right? So it's the faster you can get through a problem to the other side, regardless of the cost up front, right? You need to move through it quickly.
Hugely important.
Very important. And so my thought is leadership is what is going to determine.
Experience, too, is important. Mm-hmm. We talked earlier as nurture versus nature, and I think you can't replace experience. You can be a great leader, and I see it a lot with 28-year-olds.
MBAs coming out, yeah.
I think they're, they have great talent, great skill set, great instincts, but they've never lived through a recession. They're barely born in 08, 09, right? They didn't see that. And guys that I was learning from were saying to me, hey, you were a baby in 1972 when, we had the oil crisis and gas prices and all that. And so our leaders were saying, you guys, here's what you need to know. So that experience factor is hugely important. And so what I would say to any young leader is make sure you have mentors and, or board members or advisors or whatever. I've had an executive coach my entire executive career, and you need people like that who've lived through these things, because if you haven't experienced it, it's very, very difficult. If you haven't been to a Super Bowl, it's hard to win it, You got to lose a couple to know how to win it. And so I think experience is the other critical factor. Yes, you have to have the gut instinct, but one thing experience teaches you is you got to move fast, and it's painful to cut people or to cut cost. It hurts. I mean, nobody wants to do it. What you realize after you've been through it is the faster you do it, the better off you are. Yeah. And you have to be fair to people. It's clear they're going to be better off, and it's been my experience too, is that they're going to be better off going and doing something else. And the company will be far better off. And if you hesitate and you wait, you're going to regret it.
Yeah.
And it's something we talk about a lot. I've never thought I should have waited when I was reducing, staff or whatever. I always regretted later not moving faster.
Speed.
Yeah. Speed is important.
Well, you've always been a great mentor to young people. I've seen you do that, but he's always encouraging them, you got to do this, you got to study, you got to think about this. And I think it's interesting you have an executive coach yourself, as successful as you've been. You still go back to the basics, right? Have somebody coaching you. And
there's always somebody better, It's like you can always learn from somebody else. So, yeah, I can teach a high schooler, I can say some things to them, not my own kids. They don't listen to me, but,
there seems to be some commonality.
Well, see, I asked him, I said, hey, Jason, could you mentor me? You're a great CEO and help me out. And he says, Kevin, I want to hire you to run a pet shop.
My friend, what you deal with is vastly different and more complicated than what I deal with. Small business owners, you got to love them, or medium-sized business owners like yourself. You guys, you live stuff that I don't have to deal with. So, you're dealing with a whole nother set of challenges and problems.
Kevin likes to say, yeah, we're small potatoes. And I say, no, we're big potatoes in the making.
Well, your challenges are just as difficult, and it's more personal for you guys and than it is for me, I'm sure, so the stress level is a lot higher. That's a different set of challenges. But again, I think
bourbon sponsor.
Yeah.
I noticed the bar out there. That's good. But yeah, I think it's hugely important to have good mentors and people that have lived through experience, So when you're putting together advisors or boards for your company or your, whatever it is, your soccer club, you need people that have lived through lots of different scenarios. And right now, you just look at the last 20 years, there's lots of scenarios that have happened since 2000, right?
Oh, think about that. Yeah.
Every 10 years, there's a major crisis, or 6 to 10 years, you can look at the S&P
Right.
500 and set your watch by it. So people that have lived through a couple of those cycles are hugely valuable. And I think if you're a young leader coming out of MBA school, it's hugely important that you value those folks. Now, I'm also not a guy who just does it the way it was done in the past. That's not what I'm saying. You can ask, this about me. I'm not a follower, right?
Yeah.
But to listen and learn from that is important, and there's nuggets to be had out of that. And just a business example is pricing.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to raise prices in 21, 22. It was, most companies didn't have the DNA because we're used to deflation. The last 10 years has been price deflation. And so the DNA of companies, and you go to your sales force and say, hey, you got to raise prices 10%. I mean, these are huge price increases. They're like, no way,
right,
no way. And they would make you think they're doing it. They wouldn't do it. So you raise list price, but then discount it away so the customer doesn't pay it. I've seen it all, right? But that was some advisors of ours at Vertiv who said, guys, look, you can't raise prices fast enough or big enough. This train, you can't get ahead of this. You've really got to go hard. And it was great advice,
So I'll give you an example of that we just worked through a meeting with yesterday that echoes the right way. So Microsoft last March, after one of their most profitable quarters, announced the July price increase. And they announced it, and then they started rolling it out. And now they're on their final rollout of March or of January this year. So they're coming off their most profitable quarter.
It's just when my daughter's Disney Plus subscription keeps going up.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Disney's another one, right? They've aggressively raised their prices. But Microsoft, after their most profitable quarter, when they had every reason and an excuse, they ended up announcing an overhaul of their licensing strategy, which the licensing strategy resulted in the...
Yeah, so most companies we say built a muscle. That's the term we use in industry, is like we've built a muscle around pricing now. So over the last year and a half, 2 years, most bigger organizations have figured out how to raise price, or they're done, right? They're not going to make it. They're losing money. But the companies that have been successful, Microsoft is a great example. They've built a muscle around pricing and how to do it. Super difficult. It sounds easy, right? You make a product, you raise the price, you sell it. The problem is nobody pays the list price, as you know, and then you have salespeople and discounting and credits and lots of ways to make price increases go away. So making it stick, and then you've got inventory and you've got contracts with customers that were established at certain price levels. So you got to work through all that. So I mean, we hire third-party help to help us just map out what
pricing.
Map out pricing. There's a lot of good companies out there that are specialists in it, and they've made a killing in the last 2 years.
Well, I'm glad to hear it's just not our salespeople complaining about the price increases, because
that's natural.
So when they sit down with you, Jason, do they say, hey, look, we really think it's an 8.35% bump, but when we factor in our fee and ongoing consulting, we really think you need to be at 10 points.
Yeah.
They build their...
Yeah,
of course.
We don't let the consultants do the pricing. They more for tracking purposes and metrics, because how do you know if you raise price? What do you compare it to? Another big topic is like, is it last price paid? Is it average selling price last year? And there's no wrong answer to that.
And how does it relate with FX? What we've talked about.
You got to set the bar, and you got to pick something. That's the key, and measure off of it. So that's what we use the third parties for, is really to set the bar.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a gold nugget, right?
Man,
there.
we're deep in the weeds now.
Yeah, we are.
Business. This is day-to-day stuff that we deal with.
Yeah, good.
Well, we're going to have you back on, because I know we got limited time, because he's a busy guy here. But we're going to have to modify our rules less and have him back on, because he's a wealth of knowledge and a great thing. But I'd really like to talk sometime more about your family, because you've got a couple amazing kids over there doing amazing things. And I think that as business people, it's good to hear that we can't lose sight of that. And I'd like you to talk some more about that another time.
Keep coming back to having the right lady at home or husband at home who you can rely on, because that's something Michelle and I talked about. My wife's a chemical engineer. I mean, she's got a
yeah, she's no dummy. You look at her at her background, she ought to be sitting here interviewing you.
I mean, she worked in pharmaceuticals, and we got to a point where it was like, okay, it's you or me that's going to do the corporate stuff. And thank God she decided to raise the kids and be that person, because I would have done a disastrous job. But that's the key is really you got to have, I'm a big believer kids need parents, and they've got to have that. And Michelle is that person for us. So that's the key. And whether they're good athletes or not, that's back to Grandpa, not me. It skipped a generation.
Yeah. So. Jason, I'll tell you, that's a recurring theme. We have a lot of local small business owners that we work with, and that we've interviewed, and also in education. The principal for Brighton High School, he echoed that. Mm-hmm. I mean, in all areas,
you gotta have parents, and they have to be engaged. That's the key, and it doesn't, it's like you need to talk to people who've had older kids. I mean, we've listened to you guys as well on, your kids are a little bit older than ours, and so you get advice from parents who've been through it. And, like simply, we have a finished basement at home. The kids like to hang out down there, and we had a parent tell us, "Yep, just make sure you're taking food down there every hour." Something you get a reason to go down there every hour. Right? So I put a camera down there too, a little technology. But these are good little life
lessons. Doesn't hurt that I remember they know that.
Yeah, and a camera half the time doesn't work, but they think it does. So that's the key. Like, you just trust but verify, and you just got to keep them on the right track, and it's super important. And athletics are important for building a great person, but nobody's going to make money at that. That's the thing we keep reminding our kids. Like, it's great. It's good for building a great person, but you got to remember school is the most important thing and critical.
Well, that's a funny thing you brought up Gavin Johnson there at Brighton High School, because I love Gavin. I think he, phenomenal principal, and he's a great leader, and we're blessed to have him in our school district. But he teaches a leadership class that we talked about on one of our initial podcasts. But again, Gavin recognized Jason's talent and brought him in there. And here's the CEO, and he's flying back in between China. That was when you were on that shuttle all the time back and forth between China and Detroit. And he's in there teaching a class and mentoring the high school kids there at that leadership.
Yeah. So what we're saying is Gavin's phenomenal at delegation, which is a key
That's another good component. Important point. That was fun. That's how I met Grace and Trevor, and good kids in their own right. So you've done well, but you married up for sure.
Absolutely.
Carolyn's a saint.
Well, when you're not traveling, when you're not leading big time companies, when you're not on a board, when you're not volunteering, when you're not shuttling to a soccer or golf event, when you're sitting out there at the lake on the boat and you go to grab your bourbon, what flavor do you like to grab?
I'm a tequila guy.
Tequila guy.
That's what we're talking about. I'm not much of a bourbon guy. I was drinking Poppy Van Winkle yesterday after a meeting, and I didn't know what it was. So,
a lot of guys out there cringing right now, Jason.
Right, exactly.
Sorry, but again, my guys in Monterey will appreciate it. So, my boys down
the brotherhood, huh?
Yeah, they're I got into the tequila during my trips to Mexico. So,
what's your fave?
That's a good question. I like Dragons. And of course, there's all different levels of tequila, just like probably bourbon, I guess. I don't know all that, but aging is important. But I like mezcals too, which are the smoky versions of tequila. So, but like anything, you can get, there's 1,000 brands, but what you find out is most tequila comes from a small number of distilleries, like less than 10 or something, that really make it all. And so whether it's George Clooney's tequila or any of these guys that are coming out with their brands, most of them are made by the same families in Mexico. So the key is to find out what's their family brand. And so, most people say, oh, Jose Cuervo's terrible. Well, if it's Jose Cuervo La Familia, that's not terrible, right? That's their family bottle, right? And to get a hold of one is like getting Poppy Van Winkle. And
so what's the one with the yellow sombrero on that?
That's the one you don't want.
Yeah, that's the one you hurt your back 'cause it's always on the bottom,
you don't want that one. So most people have that impression of tequila, but I don't know a ton about the industry, but the whole alcohol business is just it's morphed into craziness. So
It's been around a long time.
yeah, thank God.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming in. Cheers and continued success.
Yes.
Yeah, appreciate it.